So I'm really sure. You look like it. Yeah, correct. It could have been over here. It's the problem.
Yeah, totally. It's still like, I just think,
The company that does like buildings and Go a bit. Also, I have to get people from attention. Yeah.
did everyone sign in?
Actually.
Sweet, sample.
Yeah, well, it's a new. Oh, yeah, I mean, I'll send you.
Yes, I want to
Say. I. Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's some, I mean, also some. Once you're, I start.
I'm working on a library, state public library. Oh, no, that's okay. This is. The first time, bro. Yes.
Oh, yeah. You know what? I was like, what's the yeah, it's on like.
Yeah.
So what do you? I'm okay. And then it started. Hi, I'm Dan. Doing it. Dan Messer. Yes. Oh, nice. That's it. I'm like, people say, So, the other kids are right, you can get started. Thank you. We should trade. Yes. We should get started. Good afternoon, Howard Gray, Hawaii State Energy Office. Been with the office since Noah let the animals off the ark. And speaking of animals, we have a lot of different animals present. And thorough representation from the Hawaii State Energy Office, including Neil Suzuki Jones, who's been here almost forever. And this is Eric Holderup, who helped us get into the Tropical Energy Code, adopted in, you're sitting down, 1994. He has been around for just a while. And welcome one and all. We had a lot of people who were supposed to register in person, but they had to go online. But we will definitely please them online and welcome. Oh, how do we look at, where do we look to look at online people? There, up there. Welcome online people. So, and this is in collaboration with Hawaii AIA Committee on the Environment, which is why you're sitting in the AIA headquarters. And we have our own Lily Koo with Hawaii Energy, and she is.
That's about interview the
Yes, and they are really pleased to announce that the credit has been extended for reflective roofs. That's a cause for celebration, a cause for being here. And architectural credits here, very, very important. We structure these classes too, not only get the credits, but just to maximize the input and the impact of the classes. And cost alternative, which is exactly why you're here. Oh, another speaker I should have introduced. Everybody knows Mike Torrey, don't they? If you haven't, you haven't lived yet. He will be one of our proud presenters. And we're going to focus on residential and full rise here. And emphasis on cost. Most reflective coatings, wall or roof, don't cost any more than normal coatings. We'll emphasize that. And you get your definitions and the energy saving potential. Oh, here's a little quiz. We are having beautiful weather right now, beautiful Hawaiian weather. What kind of weather are we going to be having in about 2 months?
Pure heat.
This should make Paris look like a paradise. That's a small joke, but hopefully it's not that bad. But there will be more clamoring for more cooling, including reflective surfaces. And there's different code options. That's another reason to be following this. And Hawaii, incidentally, was the first state in the nation to adopt a cool wall provisions way, way back when. And here's our proud presenters. We met Gail, and Ron is very, very shy sitting in the back there. Mechanical engineer has been with us for about 3 years now. That makes him a real neophyte. And here's our presenters. I will be introducing them one by one. And this is them again, one by one. And Ronan, are you front and center yet?
I am here.
You're here. Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory, and he is definitely the scholar among us. If you were to read all the articles he's either authored or co-authored, it would probably take you until you grow gray hair, or if you have gray hair, you lose that hair. He's a prolific scholar and a great presenter. He'll be doing the overview part. So, Ronan, take it away.
Thank you. I'm going to share my own screen, so I'll stop your screen share. How is that? Are you now seeing my presentation screen?
Yes. Yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining today. I'm going to talk to you about the science, the technology, and the benefits of both cool roofs and cool walls. I hail from Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory in Berkeley, California, and I was last in Honolulu in 2019. First, a little bit about cooling cities and buildings. You might ask, especially since you're here today, what makes cities and their buildings warm? Well, of course, part of it is the overall climate of the Earth and local weather systems, but there's a factor that is particularly urban. Lots of cities, and Honolulu among them, have lots of dark, dry surfaces in the form of pavements or roofs. The picture I'm showing here is a little snapshot of Sacramento in California, and the breakdown, if we look at the city from above, of how much is roof or vegetation or pavement or something else. And it varies, of course, city to city, but in this example, it's almost 40% pavement and almost 20% roof. And these are unlike natural vegetated surfaces that are inherently a little bit more reflective than you think they would be and tend to be wet. These are dark and absorb a lot of sunlight, and they are dry, especially in the drought-like California summers. So they absorb a lot of sunlight. They don't evaporate a whole lot of water, which means that in the sun, they get hot. And if it's a roof on a building, the building is getting warm. And the roof is going to heat the air in the city because hot surfaces convect to the local air. And the same is true of walls. We have a research group at Berkeley Lab called the Heat Island Group, and our mission is to cool people, buildings, and cities where it's hot. I spoke to you a little bit about what makes cities warm, and the elevation of the temperature of the city compared to what's outside the city is what we call the urban heat island effect. What can we do about it? Well, you could introduce surfaces that better reflect the sunlight. You could also add plants because plants are somewhat reflective and they evaporate water. So those are both cool for cities. If you want to get a sense of how does the temperature of the air in the city vary depending on what's around you? Are you in the middle of a concrete jungle or are you in a forest or something else? Well, you could drive around with an air temperature sensor on the roof of your car, which we've done, and many others have too. And you could then map out this temperature distribution. And this is a pretty common practice to get an idea of how the makeup of the city affects its air temperature. The federal government's National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration has been mapping these urban heat islands for, gosh, about 9 years now. I've shown on the screen a map I downloaded maybe a year or two ago showing all of their campaigns for the first 7 years. And Hawaii, Honolulu in particular, was one of the very first. So back in 2019, NOAA mapped the urban heat island effect in Honolulu. And later, if you go to this website, you can get the report and find out where it was hot and where it was cooler. By the way, in this little picture here, you can see another approach, which is maybe a little bit more eco-friendly. You can strap these sensors on a bicycle. This is clearly a COVID era picture. Going back, though, to the topic of cool roofs and cool walls. Well, the point of them is to keep the building cooler in the sun. And if you have air conditioning running, this will save energy. If you don't have air conditioning, it will make it more thermally comfortable in the building. And if you've got an air conditioner that just can't meet the cooling load, then it's going to do both. You'll save energy up to a certain point, and then the additional benefit will be to lower the temperature inside your home or your office. This is a cartoon thanks to the Cool Roof Rating Council, which shows what goes on. The sunlight is striking the roof and it's striking the wall. Now, some portion of that solar energy is going to be absorbed at the surface of the roof or the surface of the wall, and it will conduct into the building. This is sort of normal and fairly understandable. Some of that sunlight, instead of being absorbed at the surface, is going to be reflected. And the fraction of the sunlight that is reflected is called, drumroll please, solar reflectance. There's another property which is a little more esoteric. Any surface is going to emit some heat radiation based on its temperature. Most surfaces are really efficient at this process. Your skin is about 97% efficient in radiating heat as a function of its temperature. And frankly, most roof and wall surfaces are very efficient too. But a few surfaces like bare metal roofs or maybe roof coatings that incorporate metal flakes, such as an aluminum asphaltic roof coating, those are not quite so efficient. And so, for a given solar reflectance, they would get hotter in the sun. Back in the days when cars still had bare metal bumpers, you could easily test this with your finger. If you were to find a white car that had a bare metal bumper, the bumper and the white painted metal on the car shell would both be reflecting about, say, 60% of the sunlight. But the bare metal bumper would get much hotter because it was a poor emitter of absorbed radiation. So those are the two properties that we report when we're trying to describe, is a roof or a wall product cool or not cool. The solar reflectance, that's the most important thing, and then secondarily, the thermal emittance. I'm going to pivot a little bit to tell you how to make some good or bright choices about roofs and walls if you'd like to stay cool. I'll begin with the what and the where of selecting solar reflective cool surfaces. The first question we have in front of us is, what are the cool options available for roofs and walls? And the second is, where should you use cool roofs and walls? Fortunately, cool roofs and cool walls, you can get them in light colors and medium colors or dark colors, depending on your preference. Most people think of a white roof membrane, shown at upper left, as a classic example of a cool roofing material, and it certainly is. And it's often the best choice if you have a large flat roof. In some parts of the world, for reasons that don't necessarily relate to staying cool, there are white pitched roofs, could be made of limestone, for example, in this picture from the Caribbean. But a really common kind of cool roof for a pitched surface is a cool color roof tile. A natural red or terracotta clay tile, or frankly, most concrete tiles that are made to mimic the terracotta tiles, are naturally cool colors. They are much more reflective than you would think to sunlight than just by looking at them. There are also cool color versions of fiberglass asphalt shingles, and that's pretty important because for pitched roofs, that's the dominant product in the United States. Walls are very easy because your ordinary exterior wall paints that are white are also cool. Really nothing difficult about getting a cool wall. But if you want to have a wall that is not white or some other light color, you can also get cool wall paints in specialized darker colors, and I'll explain that now. White is your best choice for a cool roof or a cool wall surface, but it's a happy coincidence that over half of the energy in sunlight is not visible to your eye. I'm showing it left here a little graph of the intensity of sunlight by wavelength, and that green band in the middle, that's the representing the visible light. And the call it purple band at the left, that's the ultraviolet. That's really high energy radiation that, I don't know, will give you skin cancer. Uh, but to the right of all that, colored in some sort of a red, is the near infrared radiation. Now, these are wavelengths that are too long for your eye to perceive, but they carry pretty much half of the energy in sunlight. Now, that's really helpful for us. Why? Because it means that you can engineer a colored surface to reflect in the visible spectrum exactly as needed to give you the color that you want, but to reflect very strongly the near infrared half of sunlight that you can't see anyway. And that's the concept behind the cool color technology that's been around for about 70 years now. So this is not new, 7 decades on this earth. I'm showing at left an example of a cool brown versus a standard brown. And if you look in that middle band, the visible, you can see that their reflectance curves overlap really nicely. But in the near infrared spectrum to the right, that cool brown has a much higher reflectance than does the standard brown. And so the result is that the reflectance to sunlight of the cool brown is about triple that of the standard brown. At the bottom, I'm showing color matched versions of standard and cool colored concrete roof tiles. And this just goes to show that I could make a black surface that will reflect over 40% of sunlight. I'm glossing over some important details, but that is still basically true. In this talk, we want to think about the cost effectiveness of cool roofs and cool walls. Well, happy to say there's a very cost-effective approach, and it's even pretty darn green too. When your building is being constructed or when it's time to replace the roof, and most roofs get replaced about every 2 decades, depending on what they're made of, just pick a cool version of the roof. They usually don't cost any more than a warm version of the roof, and there's no extra labor or anything like that because you're just making a cool choice when you're going to be selecting a roofing product anyway. Now, there is one important exception. Fiberglass asphalt shingles still carry something of a cost premium when you want to get a cooler version. And we have ongoing research projects to try to find ways to get that premium down by improving the manufacturing process. But for virtually every other kind of roofing, whether it's a membrane, a coating, metal, or a tile, you can get a cool version at the same price as a warm version. You can find more information about this if you go to the coolrooftoolkit.org website. Here's a simple example for a single ply membrane, and that's really common on a box store. You can get a bright white version that's going to reflect 70 to 80% of the sunlight. You get a cool color version that's going to reflect 40 to 60% of the sunlight. What's the cost premium over some dark version of this membrane? Nothing. So that's my recommendation for you. Cool walls, even easier. The light colored exterior wall paints that you see sold today, unless somebody's gone to a lot of trouble, they're going to be cool. That's just naturally the way they are. And in fact, you can get a pretty wide color palette too. It doesn't have to be white. These are just some examples. In the center band, I'm showing what I call lower tier cool walls because they're reflecting 40 to 60% of the sunlight. And in the right band, these are higher tier cool walls that are reflecting at least 60% of the sunlight. Sarah Schneider from the Cool Roof Rating Council will talk more about how to find cool roof and cool wall products, but this is the basic physics of it. And let me just wrap with a little exercise telling you where you should use cool roofs and cool walls and how much they're going to help you. Berkeley Lab did a study back about 7, 8 years ago to assess what would a cool roof or a cool wall or both do for your annual HVAC, that's heating, ventilation, and air conditioning energy use over the course of the year. So here we're thinking not just about what happens in the cooling season, but also what the consequences might be in the heating season. Although for Hawaii, I don't think you have a whole lot of a heating season. And the answer is that across the United States, if you are in the climate zone 1 through 4, then it is a clear win for both cool roofs and for cool walls. And for cool roofs, it's even helpful if you go into US climate zone 5. Now, Hawaii is in 1A. And when we ran our simulations way back when, we didn't do Hawaii in particular, but we included Miami, which is also 1A. So what I've done is I've taken the energy saving results from our simulations in uh, Miami, and all of those results, by the way, are accessible with this nice little Excel tool that you can download from the Berkeley Lab website. In this tool, you'll just basically say where you're interested in. Is it a residential building, a commercial building? You can then pick your type of building. You can pick the location in across the United States or within California. And then you'll provide some information about whether you're making the walls cool or the roof cool and how cool they will be. And then it can come back and tell you things like your energy savings or your energy cost savings or your emission reductions. So I used the information from this tool that was generated for Miami, and I then applied the current electricity prices in Honolulu. Your prices are very high, and that means that the cooling energy savings are really valuable. Here's what we've got. If I were to, on a single family home, install a cool color roof, maybe it's looks like a red clay tile, and that reflects 40% of the sunlight, I'm going to save $2.50 per square meter of roof area. If it's a soft white roof instead, and this is not a blindingly white roof, this is just something that's reflecting about 60% of the sunlight, then I'm going to save $4.20 per square meter per year. If I look at walls, I go with a soft white wall, $3.30 per square meter per year. If it is on now an office building, a medium office building instead of a single family home, now my soft white roof on the office building will save, again, $4.20 per square meter. That's just a coincidence that the two numbers are the same. The cool wall will save you $5.40 per square meter of wall. So I've run some examples on the right side for what you might expect per building per year. If I go with a cool color roof on a single family home, I'll save $250 per year in Hawaii. And if it's a soft white roof that's reflecting 60% instead of 40% of the sunlight, then I'm going to save $420 per year. If I go with a soft white wall, then I'm going to save $660 per year on that single family home. And for a 3-story medium office building that has a 2,000 square meter roof, if I go with a soft white roof, I'm going to save $8,400 per year. And if the net wall area is about 1,500 square meters, then I'm going to save $8,100 per year if I go with a cool wall. So I should also mention that this is for older construction. This is a pre-1980 construction where you get the largest benefits. You'll get smaller benefits if it's a brand new, well-insulated building. But that's the basic story that we have. Because you have a high need for cooling and electricity is expensive in Hawaii, there are really substantial energy savings to expect when you install a cool roof or a cool wall, whether it's on a residential building or a commercial building. And these benefits will be greatest on the older construction that is poorly insulated. But you are often installing a new roof on an old building or repainting an old building. And I think that brings me to the end of what I have to share with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Very welcome.
Much decorated young man. And now we bring up, oh, let's see, any immediate burning questions? We're going to have time for a Q&A afterwards. Anything that absolutely won't work, won't wait? Nope. So bringing up Sarah Schneider, Renan gave the great overview, but now Sarah gets more specific because she is deputy researcher with the Cool Rating Council, which we have been members of for a long, long time. Also, just got back from conference in San Antonio, and Sarah travels all over the nation giving talks like this, promoting cool roofs, cool walls, and she's going to be a lot more specific than was Ronan. Ronan's the overview guy. So take it away. And Sarah has visited Hawaii at least a couple times and loves it very
Yeah,
much.
it looks like I'm there now. Hi everyone. I
Take
wish
it.
that I was in the room. Can you hear me fine?
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Howard. Let me just get a moment to situate. It doesn't matter how many times I practice which screen to present, it's always complicated. Okay, so please let me know. Can you see my title slide?
Yes.
Okay, can you see me?
Yes.
Okay, well then I'll keep my camera on. Okay, well, yes, like I was saying, I wish I was there with you all, but alas, I am not. I'm in gloomy Portland, Oregon. Yeah, thank you to Howard and Gail for inviting me to speak today, and Eric, of course. So, as Howard said, I'm with the Cool Roof Rating Council. I'm the deputy director, and I will be celebrating my 13th year with the organization in just a couple of weeks. And as you can imagine, working at a place for that long, of course, not as long as Howard has been with the energy office. Over my tenure, I've worn a lot of hats. We are a small organization, small but mighty. But currently, I oversee our policy and standards development, our code advocacy efforts, and our outreach and education activities here in the US and internationally. As mentioned, I'm calling in from Portland, Oregon, where I live with my family. And today I'm going to just give you an overview of some resources that the CRC provides that should help with code compliance and rebate qualification, etc. So, okay, so I'm sure everybody here knows that Hawaii is no stranger to cool roofs, cool exterior walls, cool surfaces. And I assume that most of you in the room and online are somewhat familiar with who the CRC is. But in case you're not, or if you've forgotten, I'm just going to give you a really, really quick summary of who we are and what we do. So we are a 501c3 educational nonprofit organization based here in North America, headquartered in Portland, Oregon, and our mission is to bring objective scientific information that's related to cool surfaces to those critical discussions and informed decisions about the impacts of heat islands, extreme heat, and energy use in the built environment. And there are three core pillars of the CRRC. The first and most notable is that we produce radiative property ratings of roofing and exterior wall materials. We also conduct research, primarily research that supports the scientific rigor of our product rating programs. And then also because we are a C3, we provide education and information to help raise the general public's awareness of the impacts of cool surfaces. Just for a little bit of history, we were established as a nonprofit nearly 30 years ago through a collaboration between the roofing industry, government agencies at the federal and California state levels, energy utilities, national laboratories, and environmental advocacy organizations. And the reason why all of these entities came together back in the 90s was to discuss how to address some of California's energy needs, as well as mitigating the growing impacts of the urban heat islands. And so these stakeholders came together to form the CRRC, and we were tasked with developing a rating system. First, to help support California, which was looking at adopting cool roof provisions in a statewide energy code. And then over this time, we provide the ratings and the technical provisions for the testing and weathering of these building envelope materials to jurisdictions across the US and abroad, so including Hawaii. And the CRC ratings primarily are used for compliance and, on the flip side, enforcement. But since 1998, we have expanded the scope of our organization beyond roofs to include the rating of exterior walls, having launched a wall rating program in 2022. And we are currently working on the development of a pavement rating program. Okay, so everybody in this room and online probably knows cool roofs and walls are prescribed in the state code. Howard said that Hawaii is the first nation, or first country in the nation to adopt provisions in the energy code for exterior walls when it comes to radiative performance. Some of you may be aware of the cool roof rebate that Hawaii Energy provides for commercial buildings. We heard at the top of the seminar that they've extended that rebate into the next program year, which is really exciting. And then also some of you, particularly those that maybe are working on LEED certified buildings, and looking at the sustainable sites credits for reducing heat islands, you may know that LEED version 5 for buildings and LEED version 5 for cities both have provisions for cool roofs and cool exterior walls. So taking this all into account, the rest of my presentation here, how the ratings help to your client or yourself comply with these code provisions or qualify for financial incentives. So I'm going to give a high-level overview of our resources, but first I want to emphasize why third-party ratings play an important role in what we do in terms of designing buildings and living and working within buildings. Third-party ratings shed light, no pun intended, on a product's radiative performance. The ratings help architects, specifiers, building owners, contractors, etc., to identify products in the marketplace that comply with codes and standards and financial incentives or green building certification. And then also the ratings are verified by a third party, which provides the assurance that the data are credible and accurate and have been obtained in accordance with the appropriate test methods and standards. And then also the ratings are often used in energy modeling to understand the projected energy use of a new building. This is often the approach taken for complying with code via the performance path. And this is all why third-party product ratings are widely used by government agencies, energy utilities, and program developers when developing programs and policies, and then also having to implement them, so compliance and enforcement. So, as I previously mentioned, the CRC rates the radiative performance of roofing and exterior wall materials, and we rate both the initial and the 3-year aged radiative performance, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. But I won't go into the physics since Ronan already did that at the top of this workshop. But essentially, I wanted to emphasize that the radiative properties of solar reflectance and thermal emittance serve as the basis of the CRC product ratings. And then also, those of you who are very familiar with code, you'll notice that these terms are also serving as the performance metrics in code provisions. So essentially, the way it works is that both properties, solar reflectance, thermal emittance, are measured and rated on a scale of 0 to 1. So the higher the value, it indicates the more reflective or more emissive the material. And then another common metric that you'll see in codes and programs is solar reflectance index, or SRI. And this applies to roofs, not walls. In short, SRI is the ability of a roof surface to return the solar energy back to the atmosphere. Roofing materials with surfaces that have a higher SRI, sorry, will be cooler than surfaces with a lower SRI under the same solar energy exposure, especially on a sunny day. So, unlike solar reflectance and thermal emittance, which are measured values, SRI is a calculated value that combines the measured reflectance and emittance values into one index value in accordance with an ASTM standard. And then those values are typically ranging between 0 to 100, with particularly cool materials exceeding 100. Okay, so to establish the CRC product ratings, the radiative properties, so solar reflectance, thermal emittance of materials are measured by independent testing laboratories that are accredited and then approved by the CRC to participate in our programs. They need to measure the materials in accordance with our program requirements and then also with our American National Standard and CCRC S100. And that's a holistic technical document that describes the testing and weathering provisions for materials for both roofing and exterior walls. And this standard is widely referenced in the energy codes, including Hawaii's energy code. So, as I mentioned earlier, I was going to take a moment to explain the difference between initial and aged ratings, which intuitively you probably understand, but I just wanted to give a little bit more detail about that. So, we publish both the initial and aged ratings on the directories. And the initial ratings, as you can imagine, are based on testing, so measuring the radiative properties of new materials, so a new product sample, whereas age ratings are based on testing completed after a period of outdoor exposure. The reason why age testing and ratings exist is because the radiative performance of materials will change over time. And it depends on the type of material, it depends on climate, it depends on a lot of different factors, um, including, the local climate, weather, soiling, so like pollution and atmospheric and deposition, and then other factors, of course, as well, like biological growth and things like that. So CRC age ratings are based on 3 years of outdoor exposure in three designated climates in the U.S. So we have a hot and arid climate, and that weathering farm is in Arizona. We have a cool and temperate with the weathering farm in Ohio, and a hot and humid with a weathering farm in South Florida. And the averaged reflectance and emittance measurements of those materials of an aged product sample across those three climates becomes the aged rating for that product. So it represents the average US climate. And age ratings of roofing materials are required for cool roof code compliance in Hawaii, which Eric will describe in a few minutes. So, as I mentioned a few times already, the CRC publishes the radiative property ratings online. And there's a separate directory for roofing products and a separate directory for exterior wall products. The roof directory has been available since 2002 and has over, I think about over 3,100 roofing materials on there right now. The wall directory is our baby. It was launched in 2022, so it's 20 years younger than the roof directory, and it's steadily growing. We don't have as much diversity in product type on the wall directory. It's pretty much all architectural coatings, wall paints at this point. But the roof directory has pretty much every type of roofing material out there, with the exception of new technology like passive daytime radiative cooling, films, and coatings at this point. So both of the directories can be accessed for free, and they serve multiple functions depending on the user and what the user's desired goal or outcome of using the directory is. So they're commonly used for code compliance. or to qualify for a financial incentive like a rebate or a tax break or something like that. Or for green building certification. So Green Globes as well as LEED both have provisions for cool roofs and cool walls in there. The directories are also frequently used for research, as well as in policy development and evaluation. Now, I do want to note that the directories list all different types of roofing and wall materials, regardless of how reflective or emissive the material is. So it's a clearinghouse of data, essentially, because the test values are the ratings. So it's not like an Energy Star qualified products list, which, by the way, hopefully all of you are well aware that the Energy Star program for roofing products sunset in 2022, so it no longer exists. And that means that the CRC directory for roofing products is the only one of its kind in the US and probably globally at this point as well. Now, the reason why the directories will list any type of product, regardless of whether or not it is quote cool or not cool, is because it's really up to the jurisdiction. For example, if there is like let's say state of Hawaii or city county of Honolulu, what that entity defines as cool, so how reflective or emissive a roofing or wall material is, might be different than, say, the city of New York. And that has a lot to do with local conditions, so climate, and a lot of other things. Which I won't go into details, but politics is part of it. Anyways, the other thing I wanted to call out though is sometimes the ratings are published on the product packaging or in product literature. And this is optional for manufacturers to do. They can take the CRC product label and incorporate that at their choosing. However, there are jurisdictions like the state of California that do require that the CRC label is included in the plan check phase, as well as showing it to the inspector when they come and do the inspection, site inspection. So the one thing I do want to call out too is that the directories are updated in real time. We constantly have a flow of new products being approved and listed on the directories. And then oftentimes there are reformulations of products, so they get new ratings. And so we always advise people to go to the directories and rely on the data there rather than maybe an outdated CRC product label that's floating out there in the marketplace. Okay, so a little bit more about the directories. For those who have not used the directories in the past, it's pretty simple and straightforward to use. There's a few different ways you can search for products. Like I mentioned earlier, the roof directory has over 3,000 products listed there. You can use the keyword search field or preset filters and search by like product type. So if you're interested in an asphalt shingle, for example, that's somewhere in the gray range. You can like put that in the color preset filter, or you can filter by manufacturer, roof slope, or if you're trying to comply with the cool roof or cool wall provisions, you can use the preset filters and set a minimum and maximum range of reflectance and emittance values, or for roofs, SRI values, and that will narrow the list down to those that should comply with the energy code prescriptive requirements. And then the search results can also be sorted. And then my favorite thing to do with the directories are to download them. So you can export the entire database to an Excel or CSV spreadsheet, and then be able to do a deeper analysis of the product information in there. This is a common approach used by researchers and policy and program developers. So another thing I wanted to call out is after the search results are displayed, you can get a unique URL and email that instantly to, say, your client if you wanted to show the options. Now, another thing I need to call out about the directory is that not every product listed there may be available in a given market or even at a given time. So we do provide the manufacturer contact information with for each listing. And you can contact the manufacturer or get a hold of the manufacturer rep and find out if that particular product is available in your locale. And then the last thing I wanted to mention about the directory is that we do have a two-page user guide. It's located in a few different places on the website, but it's also integrated within the roof directory. And it just kind of gives a nice little kind of Cliff's Notes to how to understand what all the various values and notes and symbols mean in the directory. Okay, so the last couple of minutes, I just wanted to share a little bit more about other resources that can help, particularly when it comes to talking about cool roofs and cool walls in the context of maybe trying to inform your client or a resident about what this means and what they do and what the various impacts are. So, in addition to the product directories that I just talked about, the CRC also publishes databases of various cool roof and wall codes, programs, and financial incentives around the country. And we also have various informational fact sheets and briefs that cover a range of cool surface topics, and those are tailored to different audiences. And all of these things, including the directories, can be found on our main website, coolroofs.org. And then also, very recently, we launched a new website. It's what we're calling our microsite. It's a smaller website that's very focused on educational resources. That is at coolrooftoolkit.org. And we just launched that, I don't know, like 2 weeks ago. It's brand new. The microsite contains an extensive searchable knowledge base of over 600 studies, white papers, articles, and other media about cool surfaces, including cool pavements from around the globe. The site also packages up several of the resources that I mentioned earlier that are on the main site as well, and have curated them to various audiences, including architects, engineers, installers, policymakers, etc. And then also the microsite features a blog where we will periodically publish articles about various cool surface projects. So that could be new demonstration projects or pilots or new innovative materials that are emerging in the market, as well as other interesting and relevant activities from around the globe. And then another great educational resource that I wanted to mention is something that Howard Wigg helped us create as a member of the CRRC Education Committee, and that is the Cool Surfaces Lesson Plan. This is a free lesson plan for educators who are interested in teaching students about the impacts of cool surfaces on urban heat islands. And the lesson plan includes 3 animated videos, a teacher guide, and instructions for a student-led experiment, among other resources. And that is available on our website as well as the new microsite. And then lastly, I wanted to do a plug for our free continuing education course. It's worth 1 AIA credit, 1 GBCI credit, 1 IBET credit, and a bunch of others that the course is registered with. It is a self-paced course that takes about an hour to complete and goes into detail about designing buildings for heat resilience and energy efficiency using, of course, cool roof and cool exterior wall materials. And it's hosted on a platform through AEC Daily. It's again free to take. You just need to create a free account with AEC Daily, and you can get there by scanning the QR code. And with that, mahalo. Thank you so much for your time. And I don't know if there's time for any questions right now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, Sarah. As you can see, she's just scratching the surface of all the materials that are available, and you will be receiving copies of these slides, and you just studying her material available, you could spend the rest of your life just getting educated. And speaking of the rest of your life, somebody who has locally had the time of his life, especially crawling all over roofs for many, 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 many decades, gives me huge pleasure to bring up our own Mike Murray, the president of the largest roofing company in all of Hawaii. And because you're asking, does this stuff really work? Mike, well, he's got on real dress shoes right now. But he is right up there in the real world. And is he ready for us? Or at the slides, yeah. Okay, bring up Mike Curry.
Thank you. Honored to be here. Actually, I wasn't sure I was actually gonna be invited to come. I thought it was a joke when he invited me to come to the seminar. And then all of a sudden he asked me for a headshot and I'm like, oh my gosh, you stand so people. Okay. Should I start over? Okay, so oh, this is kind of loud. Okay, so my name is Mike Torrey from Torrey's Roofing. It's a family-owned company. I've been doing this full-time for almost 40 years. And I've been working on the roof and also in the administrative part. So I run the company along with my siblings. I have 2 brothers and 1 sister, and my son, and a nephew, and my uncle. So it's a family business, and my mom and dad is semi-retired or pretty much retired. So I'm here to actually talk about a couple of examples of cool roofs and does it really work? I'm glad to say that it does work. The technology of the roofing material now has changed so much from pitch and gravel, which is hot tar and rocks and old asphalt shingle roofs, to more Energy Star or cool roof rated system. You have single ply, you have modified cap sheets, you got modified shingles, and they actually do work to a certain degree. And I have 2 examples of customers that we've done, one on a shingle roof and one on a flat roof. So on this project right here, this is in Mililani. You can see it's a white roof. We put on polyfresco. It's a modified cap sheet roof. And the homeowner, the reason why it's white over here is because the membrane is actually asphalt. So the ends, you just coat it to make it all blend to be white. But it's a modified cap sheet with a acrylic coating on top, and it's meant to reflect the sun's heat. What the customer told me when we finished this roof about maybe 2 months ago, it's open beam ceiling. His house has no attic space. So the heat from the roof just transfers down directly into his living room. He told me that it would get so hot in his house that by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, he would have to leave his house and drive around in his air condition to avoid the heat in his house. It was unbearable. After we put on his roof, he says now it's very comfortable to be inside his house. He doesn't have to leave. And he used to have to open all of his windows to let the wind blow through, but now he only has to open it like 4 inches. So when he was telling me this story, I was like, wow, is this really true? But he's a very technical person. And I'm very pleased to announce that this material is one of the best roofs at reflecting the sun's heat. You also got single ply membrane. We got Sam over here with Carlisle, Harbor Wind. He has a product that is a cool roof also. And when we started putting on single ply roofing, probably about 20 years ago, our customers said that it does keep the house cooler. So we're talking more about residential roofs, so it doesn't have any insulation. But when you're working on commercial buildings, when you add roof insulation, which is an R20, and the cool roof on top, it does make a huge difference for the building owners on the inside. So that's on the flat roofs, residential. On the slope roof, we got shingle roofs. We got Malarkey over here too, Ellie. is from Malarkey Roofing. They also have a high SRI value shingle that reflects the sun's heat. We did a project maybe about 10 years ago in Village Park, and that customer was so technical that he had a thermometer in his attic space before we put his roof on. And I believe it was over 100 degrees in his attic before we put his roof on. And after we were done installing the solar reflective shingle, he said it brought it down about 15 degrees. So that's significant. So it does work. If you want to have the question, does it work? Yes, it does. The color matters. There is some shingles that there is no cost increase if you go with the white color. But there are some shingles that are darker, that has the high SRI value, and it costs a little more. But if you choose the white, it will reflect just as much SRI value as the ones that you got to pay more for. So that's all I have to say. It does work. So if you have any questions, I can answer any questions that you can have later.
Thank you, Mike. And Mike, you'll be around for a little while afterwards, yeah. If you want to pepper him with questions, touch him, see if he's cool, he is. Next, we get to the most fascinating part, codes. What he follows the IECC. We're not quite up to the 2024 yet. We're on the verge of it. We didn't quite make it. But to fill us in on the more technical aspects is Eric Kolderup. Hope you're sitting down. He helped bring to Hawaii the Tropical Energy Code, which is right in here in 1994. Some of you have history books that don't even go that far back. So take it away, Eric.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm old, Howard. I get it. Yeah, I can't make a presentation with Howard without feeling really old. Hopefully you guys online can hear okay. And so I'm an engineer, I'm a building energy consultant, and my passion is building energy efficiency. And as Howard noted, been working with the state for many years on energy codes. And so my goal today is to do just a real quick tour of how cool surfaces are dealt with in the energy code. We're not going to do the whole energy code, of course. There are online recorded webinars about that. The current code, as a lot of you probably know, is the 2018 IECC here in the state. There's a set of state amendments. So if you want to know what the requirements are, you do need to have both of these documents. And then if you're, in one of the counties, Honolulu, Kauai, Maui, each have their own subsequent set of amendments. So you really need like 3 documents to make sure that you understand the requirements in your jurisdiction. We'll show some links. The State Energy Office's website has links to all these documents where you can find them. And we'll also show real quickly some checklists that are there that have been developed previously that kind of just compile all of these into one document. So you don't necessarily have to look at all 3. I'm going to start with low-rise residential, and then we'll talk a little bit about commercial. Now, background, there are several different compliance paths for residential. There's the tropical zone, which you can use if you're less than half the home is air conditioned. The prescriptive, which is kind of the meat of the standard, is for all the others. There's envelope systems and electrical requirements. And then an important element that we'll talk about is the points option, which is a state amendment that adds some flexibility. And that's where there are a number of ways that you can take credit for a cool roof or cool wall surface. And then there's 2 computer methods. So the simulated performance alternative and the energy rating index. So those both use 2 computer models, one of a standard building and one of your building. In both these cases, the standard building has a reflectance for the roof and the walls of 25%. So if you your design is better, your energy model will give you some credit for having a more reflective surface. So that's another option. And then there's some requirements for large homes in Honolulu and Maui, which are in addition. Okay, so the tropical zone, there's a roof insulation credit for cool roofs. Under prescriptive, there's a mass wall insulation alternatives, which we'll talk about, and the point system. And then we'll talk quickly about alterations. That's an existing home, you're changing the roof. Let's click through all these. So the tropical zone is very simple. For roofs, you can do either R19 insulation, or you can do less insulation, R13, plus a cool roof surface. And so what that means is the table on the right there shows the thicknesses. So typical bad insulation, 3.5 inches gives you R13. 6 inches roughly gives you R19. So you can get by with less insulation if you have a cool roof, right? And what do we mean by cool roof? In this case, they're talking about an age solar reflectance of at least 0.55 and thermal emittance of at least 0.75. So in effect, this is probably, a white membrane. It'd be hard to meet these with sort of typical asphalt shingle type, right? There are some exceptions for portions of the roof that are shaded, and that's areas that, for example, are under a PV panel, have vegetated portions of your roof, stuff like that. But that's the tropical zone. And then in the prescriptive requirements, this is sort of the whole scope. We're just going to focus here on the roof and the walls. So the base roof requirement is R30. And then the wall insulation requirement depends on the type of wall. So start with mass walls. So the base requirement is that you have to have some insulation on your concrete masonry or concrete wall. Depends on whether it's on the exterior or the interior surface, or you can just meet a U factor requirement, which you can meet different ways, but that's the base requirement. The state amendments add a point system, which should give you some flexibility. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But the state also add amendments that deals with the fact that in Hawaii, well, just backing up a second, insulation obviously is to reduce the heat gain. So from the outside to the inside, or if you're in a cold climate, from the inside to the outside. Here we care mostly about heat coming from the outside. And since, outdoor, indoor temperature difference was not huge here in Hawaii, it's not like Phoenix where it's 115 degrees outside. The conductance due to the temperature difference is less important here than it is in other places. What's really important is the solar heat gain. So there are other alternatives to insulation, such as having a light surface, cool surface, or a shaded surface that can give you sort of roughly equivalent performance. So that's the motivation behind these. One thing to point out is that you'll see here exterior visible light reflectance of greater than 0.64. So that's the basis of the standard or the code. We've been talking so far about solar reflectance, but there's not a whole lot of data. The Cool Roof Rating Council is working on getting solar reflectance data for wall coatings, but it's not regularly available for all paints. And so instead of doing that, the next best thing is to specify the visible light reflectance. And as Ronen noted earlier, most light colored wall paints have a pretty good solar reflectance. Does that make sense? And just to kind of illustrate the trade-off between color and insulation, there's a study done several years ago, and this is a simulation-based study for Hawaii. And they looked at 4 different building types with several different types of mass walls. And just pulling out the results for the low-rise apartment building with partially grouted concrete masonry units. This is the energy cost in dollars per square foot of home per year. And this first bar is an insulated wall. That's basically the code complying wall with the 30% reflectance. You see around $6 a square foot of energy bills. If you take away the insulation, the cost goes up. If you reduce the reflectance, meeting that 64% reflectance threshold, you see that the energy cost on an annual basis is about the same. So their conclusion in the study is that you can get roughly equivalent performance with a light color compared to just the minimum code compliant insulation. But yeah,
I thought a mass wall to count as a mass wall had to be full.
to count as there's criteria for like the heat capacity that counts as a mass wall. I could check that, but I think that a partially grouted wall would still be considered a mass wall for purposes of energy code. But we can,
Okay,
Confirm.
and what is partially grouted? Is there a percentage?
I'd have to look at their paper. Yeah, in their paper, they describe, the more details of what partially grounded mean. They also have similar results for fully grouted concrete masonry and solid concrete. Okay, so that's mass walls. So real quickly on roofs, R30 is the base requirement, right? And what that means is, say, 8 to 10 inches of bad insulation. So that's the prescriptive requirement for roofs. For walls, R13 in a wood frame wall. And that's, about 3.5 inches, fits in a normal 2x4 cavity, right? And then for metal walls, because the metal conducts heat, there's an additional requirement that there be a continuous layer of insulation, like foam board, in addition to cavity. And so the amount of continuous insulation that's required depends on how much cavity insulation you have. But this adds, obviously, a significant extra expense to the construction to add that foam board. So, and those are just the thicknesses of foam board that you would need to meet those R values. So both these cases, there's a points option, which is gives you some extra flexibility. So this is an example of one of the 3 tables. There's a table for wood frame walls, metal frame walls, and mass walls. And these are in the state amendments to the code. And it's just a little game, pretty simple game. You just have to have better than 0 points. That sounds pretty easy, like an easy win, right? And the way this works is that if you do, for example, R13 plus continuous R3, that's basically the prescriptive requirement. That's 0 points. So your wall complies. But what if you wanted to do just R13 with no continuous insulation? That gets you -1. So you have to find something else on the list to make up for that. One of the ways is R13 plus a high reflectance wall gets you back to 0. So that means you don't need to use the continuous insulation if you have the light colored wall. And similarly on the roof, you can get by with R19 instead of R30 if you have a cool roof membrane. So those are ways that both the reflective walls and reflective roofs are addressed in the low-rise residential code. You can also do other things like a more efficient air conditioner, for example, if you wanted to offset the extra insulation. Just pause for a second to see if there's any questions about the residential side of things.
So if you're between 1,000 and 2,500 square feet, you're 0 points, right?
Yeah, that's a good catch. So if you have a home that's larger than 2,500 square feet, you start out with -1 point. So that makes it harder to build a bigger house. But yeah, between 1,000 and 2,500, that's 0 points.
Then you mentioned there's a Honolulu amendments. So does that mean like up to like Salt Lake, Honolulu, or is it the whole island?
Well, these are part of the state amendments, and they're also adopted in all the county amendments, and it applies to the whole counties.
So Honolulu County amendments, when you said the third portion, does that mean just like Honolulu proper or the whole of the island?
When we're talking about Honolulu in this context, we're talking about the whole island, the city and county.
It's like Maui.
Yeah. Good question. Okay.
Oh, I had one more question.
Oh, yeah.
The installation one where you had the cathedral. So that has to be R30, no matter where you put installation.
Yeah, so the question is about, cathedral ceiling. So the R30 is the prescriptive requirement, and that's regardless of whether that's on the attic floor or the attic ceiling or within a cathedral thesion construction, right? So if you wanted to do R19, then you could do that with a cool roof instead, right? Okay, last thing on residential. So alterations. The basic requirement in the code is when you alter something, then that thing needs to meet the new construction requirements. So like insulate the roof if you're altering the roof. But there are exceptions. So if you're just repairing a part of the roof, no requirement. If you're recovering, so you're not taking off the existing membrane, no requirement. But if you're doing roof replacement, the base IECC says that you need to bring it up to some level of insulation. And there's some details about that. But the state made some amendments. So on the residential side, the options are, well, R30, that's just the basic requirement, or a cool roof. So the cool roof being basically a white roof. Or number two is you could do, if you're the tropical zone home, R19 or cool roof. Or you could choose any two of these. Now, Energy Star roof covering is what it says in the code. Energy Star ratings don't exist anymore. So we'll have to talk about how the jurisdictions deal with that. Or radiant barrier, attic ventilation, or the exceptions listed in this commercial part of the code, which basically means it's shaded. So this gives you some flexibility for an existing home when you're stripping off the existing roof and replacing it.
And that amendment came at the request of the Hawaii Roofing Association. And they said if we have to comply with the mainland code, we're going to double the cost of re-roofing. So we worked with the Roofing Association, came up with these reflective values. And I believe the president of the Roofing Association at that time had initials of MT.
Okay, and just real quickly on the commercial side. So there's again prescriptive requirements and alteration related requirements. There are two paths that you can follow for the commercial side. You can do the prescriptive requirements, or you can do what's called the total building performance, which is a computer calculation. We're going to focus on the prescriptive requirements here. And the first one is low slope roofs. So commercial low slope roofs need to be cool roofs. And the way that's defined is solar reflectance of at least 0.55, thermal emittance of at least 0.75. And these are 3-year age values that Sarah referred to. And by low slope, we mean less than 2 and 12. So if you have 2 and 12 or more, that doesn't fall under this category. But if it's less than 2 and 12, then it's considered low slope. And it's generally going to be some sort of white membrane to meet these. If you don't want to do that for some reason, you can follow that total building performance computer method to comply. And then you'll do something else in your building, right, to make up for the efficiency loss. Make sense? Okay. And then the other prescriptive requirements, commercial wood framed options are R13 plus a continuous foam layer, or R20. If you have a 2x6 wall cavity, you can put it in R20. But state amendments allow you to use a light color instead of having that continuous foam board, or shade the wall. So you get some credit for having cool walls. It's the same thing basically on the metal framed option. You can get rid of the continuous insulation with the light color or an overhang. And this PF, apologies, I didn't explain that earlier. That stands for projection factor. And that's just the ratio of basically the width or projection of the overhang divided by the distance from the bottom of the overhang to the bottom of the wall. So that's 0.3 times 10-foot high wall, 3-foot overhang.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Are all of those solutions going to eliminate thermal bridging through that metal frame wall option, the construction?
Well, the reflective coating doesn't necessarily eliminate the thermal bridging. It just mitigates some of the solar heat gain, and the foam board mitigates the thermal bridging. The total performance of the thermal bridging plus white is maybe roughly equal to foam board plus a dark surface. It's kind of a trade-off. Ideally, you do both, have the foam board and also a white surface,
That
but
makes sense.
to comply, you don't have to do that.
Thank you.
And we're always dealing with the building industry who's saying, no more codes that raises costs, no more codes that raises costs. How much does it cost to put that reflective surface on compared to putting on that extra layer of insulation? Answer, zero added costs. This is a big reason why we put these provisions in.
All right, so commercial mass walls, it's similar to residential, except the amount of insulation required is a little bit more. But again, there are amendments that are added. You could do away with the insulation with the white surface, shaded surface, or if you have a thick enough concrete wall. Okay, so last one, alterations. So the commercial alterations also have an amendment that are very similar but slightly different to the residential ones. So once again, if you're doing roof replacement, new construction, or you can have a surface with an initial solar reflectance of 85%, an age of 53. So again, that's a white surface, or at least one of, instead of two of, the commercial gets only one of those. Energy Star, radiant barrier, attic ventilation, or again, shaded. Here we go. Okay, so then the last thing I mentioned, there are checklists. So if you go to the State Energy Office's website, you can find 3 checklist versions, one with just the state amendments, one with Honolulu amendments, and one with Maui amendments. Just kind of help simplify your life. They look something like this, and there's little symbols that indicate which of these sections is affected by county amendment and state amendment. So you could go, if you wanted to, look at the original code section to compare. There are also recordings of past trainings that you can access there. So if you want to know more about the energy code, you can find those on that website. Just pause quickly. Running a little low on time. Any quick energy code questions before I just do a quick minute on LEED? Okay, so Sarah mentioned that you get credit for cool surfaces in LEED. If you're doing residential, so there's a LEED for single family homes, version 4.1, I believe is the current one for that. There's the heat island reduction credit, and it applies to the combination of roof and non-roof hardscapes, like driveways, walkways, other sorts of hardscapes. So 50% of those surfaces need to meet reflective criteria. For the roof part, these are criteria. If it's 2 to 12 slope, low slope, then it has to have a pretty high reflectance. So that's sort of white. If it's a steep slope, then it can have a solar reflectance index of 39. So you can meet that with some colored products. Not necessarily the standard asphalt shingles, but with, in some cases, you can meet that with those colored products. All right, so that's LEED for homes. On the new construction side, very similar, heat island reduction credit. The formula is a little different. It's still looking at roof and non-roof hardscapes, but you just calculate up the areas. Once you're over a certain threshold, you get the credit and the same qualifications for those roof surfaces. Finally, on the commercial LEED, there's also a project priority credit. So you can apply for this credit for heat island mitigation with cool walls. So the other one was just roofs. Here, if at least 60% of your gross wall area has a SRI of at least 0.6, so it's for light color paint, then you could potentially earn this credit. So that's LEED. So if you're doing a LEED project, definitely check those out.
And I believe Sarah had a very heavy hand in creating those numbers. And we're honored to have somebody from Hawaii Energy, who I'm approaching rapidly, so he can say something about the extended credits.
Oh, okay, sure.
And introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Dan Vestas. I'm the Principal Development Engineer for the Hawaii Energy Program, specifically commercial and industrial sector. We do have the Cool Roof incentive again for PY 26, which starts on July 1st. The requirements for that are eco customer commercial rate, and the solar reflectance requirement or spec should meet 0.70, and the thermal emittance needs to exceed 0.75. The way to qualify it is just to essentially verify that there is not a white roof up there. If you don't have specs or whatnot, we just need the roofer to essentially confirm that we're not trying to, have someone do a calculation on what's there existing. And then the incentive is 10 cents per square foot. So if you want any more information, Lily's here. You can get a card for myself or hawaiienergy@lightos.com.
Thank you, Dan. We have, yes, a few minutes for questions. We already had some. Please pepper us.
Ms. Ron, are you seeing anything online?
Yeah, there was one question early on that talked about Tesla solar roofs and how it's difficult to find emissivity and absorptivity data for non-PV block tiles.
Tesla rules, data, none. Oh, I'm just doing the microphone. That's in your view, yeah.
The question was just like, as designers, we should have information for things like this. Like, are there any observation or recommendations you have on how to evaluate those kinds of numbers?
Sarah, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Did you hear the question about no?
Yeah,
No specification?
I can see it in the chat.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's unfortunate that they're not willing to share that information. It's interesting because, as I mentioned earlier, the state of California requires CRC ratings as part of its energy, statewide energy code. And there is an exemption for BIPVs or building integrated photovoltaics, and that's what this product falls under. I have reached out to the California Energy Commission, which is the regulatory agency responsible for adopting the statewide code and making changes to it. So until they're required to get a CRC rating, there's really no way we can obtain that information other than doing testing of like getting our hands on a product and doing testing on the non-PV part. So just the regular roof tiles.
Thank you, Sarah. That's a difficult question. Does somebody have a less difficult question?
Well, there was a question online about whether PV panels are considered cool roofs. And for the purposes of code compliance, yes, the portions of roof that are covered by PV are, considered cool roofs. So they do not have to be.
They're treated as shaded areas where the PV is over them. There's about at least a 6-inch gap between the panel and the roof, and that allows the flow through of air, so that the PV panel's heat is not transferred directly in. More questions?
Ronan has his hand up.
Oh, Ronan?
So a little bit of history. When it comes to solar equipment on roofs, we've tried to make sure that provisions that require cool roofs don't discourage the installation of solar equipment on the roofs. So that's why you'll often see exceptions made for PV panels and such. And as somebody just said, if the PV panel is offset from the roof, then the panel will shade the roof. So there is really some cooling benefit. But mostly it was to make sure that cool roof requirements didn't discourage people from installing photovoltaic panels on their roofs.
And Renee, do you have any experience with bifacial PV panels and the impact of cool roofs on those?
Well, I remember back in the days of what was the company that made the cylindrical PV panels that Cylindra, right, which went out of business when PV panel prices dropped 50% about a decade ago. PVs that see both the sky and what's below will benefit from a more reflective roof. How much it benefits really is a function of how much of the light reflected from the bright roof actually strikes the underside of the panel. But it is generally true that if you have a two-face PV panel with one face looking up and one face looking down, then having a white roof beneath the PV panel will be helpful. It's just you've got to remember if the PV panel itself is shading the white roof, then there isn't that much sunlight striking the white roof. The cylinder technology was using literally a cylindrically shaped PV panel, which gave it better access to the light that was reflected from the roof without shading the roof all that much.
I just want to
Thanks.
piggyback off of that. The CRC recently published a two-pager. It's available on our website, as well as a microsite that summarizes the mutually beneficial relationship between bifacial PV and a reflective roof. And it does talk a little bit about monofacial as well and the relationship there. And that is essentially just synthesizing the field of research on the topic. So I do encourage folks to take a look at that. And then there are links to other studies if you wanted to do additional research.
And I always remember that the cylinder people were even more excited about white roofs than anybody who was trying to use white roofs to cool a building or a city, because the white roof was the key for their technology to generate more electricity. So they were extremely gung-ho on white roofs.
And we're just about out of time. Oh, Mike, yeah.
Okay, so regarding that comment on Tesla roofing, is that comment regarding the Tesla roofing panels? Or is it Tesla solar panels that's put on top of the roof? Because they make two different types of systems. They make a roofing PV roof system that the whole roof is PV.
I think it's that. It was
Yeah.
Tesla solar.
Yeah, so it is California Energy cool roof rated. And I got that from Tesla themselves. They sent me the document, so I can send you the documents later.
They're not rated, Mike, by us. Yeah. So I don't know how valid that information is.
Maybe saying that they comply with energy code because they're PV? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I got the documentation, so I'll send it.
Yes, please. If they say they're rated by the CRC, they can get in trouble.
All right.
A quick side note on that. I attempted to sell the Tesla shingle roof, the PV shingle roof. 1,200 square roof is about 125 grand for residential, and it went up from there. So I don't see it as a significant problem in real world applications.
Yes, very
I think there's
expensive.
only two on the islands.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's one up what we were on.
Yeah.
This was in Kentucky, 125 grand minimum, and that included just the shingle, the non-PV shingles as well.
Yeah, I just installed one on Lanai. Yeah, just 1 month ago.
Didn't 17 come out with one too?
The certain D has one too. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, and does anybody know what the strange parrot is up on the screen? This is a survey. Please fill out your survey. And what we're really, really interested in is your ideas for future training. That's what the Energy Office is all about. That's what Hawaii Energy is all about. Get the word out, future train. And if you have enough people have a suggestion for a given topic, all right, George, we will provide that training. And we are out of time. Thank you, all new speakers. So.
Aloha.
And
Aloha.
we will
Bye-bye. Mahalo.
Bishop. Is there one, let's go.
Sarah, I think that's.
Sarah, you have your hand up.
I think she said bye. She said all
Okay, we will be around for informal conversation. Thank you so much again. Yeah.
So he walks in the door.
Yeah.